What's up everyone, it's Endymion and I have some good news and some bad news for you all. The bad news is that Netflix has unleashed the Cleopatra series upon the masses to watch. The good news is that it's garbage and it seems everyone thinks the series should be thrown into the sun. Currently on Rotten Tomatoes, Cleopatra is sitting at a measly 17% for the critic score, and has a 2% on the audience side, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but have we ever seen such a low audience score before? Anyway, the fact critics hate this show too is just hilarious to me, because Netflix's Cleopatra had everything it needed to shield itself from genuine criticism. It had a race-swapped female person of color leading actor, the executive producing crone of a woman known as Jada Pinkett Smith, and it had enough identity politics to drown out any of the noise. But even then, it wasn't enough to save the show, and this will likely go down as one of the biggest bombs for Netflix this year. One reviewer said, "James does a good job. Unfortunately, the rest of the cast play their parts like they're in something more akin to Caligula than a serious examination of Cleopatra's life." Another reviewer said, "It's too soapy for serious history fans and not enough of a soap for viewers who like juicy historical dramas." This one's great and says, "A surface-level docudrama that often slips into Mills and Boon territory. Netflix's Cleopatra tells the legendary monarch's tale with all the dramatic heft of a Wikipedia article." Even the user reviews aren't holding back, with one person saying, "I couldn't get through the first episode. Terrible writing and storytelling. Should not be advertised as a documentary series. It is nothing but a bad grade drama series. A documentary is defined as consisting of official pieces of written, printed, or other matter. Did no one bother to view any historical materials? Cleopatra was an extremely intelligent woman, spoke multiple languages, including the Egyptian language. She was the first Greek queen to do so. However, she was not a warrior. This was a soap opera at best. Leave history to the historians, Netflix." Oh, that one stings. This easily ranks up there with the worst television productions of the last 20 years. Why this was labeled as a documentary is beyond me. Theories that go against long-established history are presented as facts. The show Ancient Aliens has more credibility than this train wreck. Jesus Christ. I thought the Egyptians were overreacting when I heard they were going to condemn this work. This was just downright insulting to the intelligence and culture of those poor people. It's basically 4 hours of a bunch of hacks claiming Cleopatra to be some sort of messiah feminist figure. It's also such a Frankenstein's monster style of a product. It is neither entertaining or enlightening. It feels both incredibly cheap and a massive waste of money. Anyway, I think you get the picture that anyone who's actually watched this thing couldn't care less and thinks it's an abomination. So, what happens next? Well, I doubt Netflix will outright cancel Jada's African Queens franchise, since if they do, they're not only admitting defeat, but the identity politically affiliated nutjobs will likely pull the racism card and claim Netflix doesn't want to tell black stories. Even though Cleopatra wasn't black to begin with, but then again that didn't stop Jada and her moronic team of writers from blackwashing this historical figure in the first place. I just know Jada is rubbing her bald head right now, walking in circles as her daughter Willow struggles to read the reviews to her.
What's going on? Why don't they like it? We spent $250 million on this!
Jada will find a way to blame this travesty on someone besides herself, even though her stink can't be removed from the show's identity. Since she not only executively produced it, she also narrates it too, which is just, I love how this all turned out, I really do. This didn't stop Cleopatra's actress from attacking viewers, with Adele James recently saying that blackwashing isn't a thing. Really, Adele James? Blackwashing isn't a thing? You're telling me Hollywood has never in their history took a character that wasn't black and changed them? Not once? You're really going to die on that hill, huh? Adele James broke her silence on her playing Cleopatra on the 79th episode of the Wayne Ayers podcast, where she said, and I quote, "Blackwashing isn't a thing, is it? I find it sad that people are either so self-loathing or so threatened by the blackness that they feel the need to do that, to separate Egypt from the rest of the continent. There was absolutely a lot of people saying very horrible things, but it definitely wasn't everyone. I think that's so important to remember that, like, in the grand scheme of things, there were some people who lost their minds over it. But there was a lot of really positive responses immediately as well. And it's remained, it's consistent. People are so excited. I'm getting messages all the time. But this is the biggest thing I have had to deal with in the public sphere. It's the most I've had to navigate personally as an actress. This has definitely elevated my profile considerably on an international scale. The biggest show I had done before this was a television program here in the UK. That does have repeats in other parts of Europe, but several years down the line. In the UK it's big, but outside of the UK it's not as big. So this is like a whole nother scale of a project for me. I would say it's not wholly negative, and actually, as time has gone on, those voices have gotten quieter and quieter, end quote. There's a lot to unpack there because the copium levels are just off the charts. First off, when she says people are excited, it's the woke revisionist crowd that's happy they get to culturally appropriate something to fit their narrative. And not wholly negative. My sister in Christ, your show currently has one of the lowest Rotten Tomato scores of the year.
Company of such wonderful musicians. This is a dream come true, and all I can say is believe in yourself and don't give up, because there is a spot on that stage for you. Good night.
Not even the critics who usually back these sorts of things aren't even coming to your rescue. And the voices against this have gotten quieter. What universe does Adele James live in? Because it doesn't sound like the same one where this show exists. If anything, the outcry against Cleopatra has been nothing short of legendary, with Egypt as a country denouncing the show. The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Archaeology already condemned the entire production, and Adele James had some things to say about that, and I quote, "Yeah, I know I shouldn't laugh, but it's quite funny. It's quite funny. The level of threat that you must feel just on my skin tone to file a lawsuit against an entire streaming service, that to me is really extreme. It's a really extreme reaction." The ancient Egyptians, they don't think about race like we do, because race has only really been contextualized since we understand since the transatlantic slave trade. That's not how people thought back then, right? So it's really bizarre, but to me, I find it very sad. I feel sad for them, end quote. What's an extreme reaction is you taking a role that you knew was culturally insensitive and based solely on crude political leanings. And not only is Adele James tone deaf to the very end, but she ends by saying she feels sad and pities the Egyptian people. My friends, this is textbook example of how to never respond to criticism when you're so clearly in the wrong. This idiot really thinks she knows better than the literal nation of Egypt when it comes to their own history. This would be like if Danny DeVito played Genghis Khan, pissed off everybody, and looked directly into the camera and said, "Shut up, I know more about this than you." Hello? What? Adele James closes out her insane tone-deaf interview with, and I quote again, "Well, if they watch it, if they give us some hate views, I hope that they will understand that it's a debate, it's a conversation, it's not a definitive answer." And actually the research on it is really interesting, and the people talking about it are really interesting. But I'm sure they'll discover quite quickly that the series is about so much more than that. Cleopatra is no more reduced to what her heritage may or may not have been than I am, or any of us. We're all full human beings, and she was a full human being, a person, and that's what this is about, end quote. Oh my god, does she understand what she's even saying here? How can this show, which is advertised as a documentary, may I add, which means it's being promoted as a show based on historical facts and should be treated as truth, can also be treated as a debate and not a definitive answer? There is no debate with facts. I can't sit here and debate with you if gravity exists or not. It just does. There's no point in sitting down and discussing whether oxygen is needed in order to keep living, or if you need to eat to stay alive. There's no debate here, it's just indisputable facts. You can't be a documentary about something like Cleopatra and have the convenient shield of mystery by saying, "Who knows, maybe she was black, we don't know for sure. Anyway, we're going to place this documentary into our African Queens franchise."
Senator, why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Adele James should join the Olympics because her ability of mental gymnastics is superhuman level. Maybe she can star in a documentary as Sarah Soulstorm in the future. since Adele James already has experience in playing people who look nothing like her in the first place. Some of the scholars who worked on this doomed series claim that it's impossible to know what Cleopatra looked like, and that applying our racial constructs to the ancient world is anachronistic. Anachronistic, by the way, means belonging to a period other than that being portrayed. Just figured I'd put that in there since it's not exactly a word you hear every day. Anyways, Adele James also said, "I don't know if there are words powerful enough to express what I hope this will mean for young people all over the world who look like me and who don't, who will now get to grow up seeing the greatest leader of all time being portrayed by a black mixed woman on one of the biggest streaming services in the world. Greatest ruler in the world." They really are drinking their own Kool-Aid. At least when it comes to Netflix's Queen Charlotte series, it opens with a disclaimer that says, "This is a story about Queen Charlotte from Bridgerton. It is not a history lesson, it is fiction based on fact." Which doesn't fix the fact that Queen Charlotte wasn't black to begin with. However, at least Netflix was willing to explain to viewers that, hey, yeah, we know she didn't look like this, but we're making a show about this and doing our own spin, but yes, it's fiction. That at least alleviates the major issue at hand because it's not being pushed as fact. However, Cleopatra is still labeled as a documentary and clearly they refuse to change it, so here we are. And recently, Egyptian comedian Bassem Youssef has blasted Netflix and other comedians like Kevin Hart for their insensitive comments. Youssef claims the push for Afrocentrism is erasing Egyptian culture by appropriating it. And Kevin Hart allegedly made a claim that black people built the pyramids, therefore Egypt is black. Well, Bassem Youssef got pissed. Youssef said, and I quote, "They are appropriating my culture, calling the people of Egypt of today, despite their skin tone, they call us invaders. It is about the continuous cultural appropriation and falsification of history that has been done by the so-called Afrocentric movement. The Afrocentric movement started this last century as a way, in a good intention, to teach African Americans about their rich history of West Africa, the great empire of Benin, of Ghana, of Sangali, the great empire of Mali. But the thing is, that is why you find people like Kevin Hart who subscribes to these theories who claims that his ancestors built the pyramids. They call us as intruders and they, the pyramids, are being erased from our own history." End quote. Allegedly, Kevin Hart said, "We must teach our children the true history of black Africans when they were kings in Egypt and not just the era of slavery that is cemented by education in America. Do you remember the time when we were kings?" And in case you don't know what it is, Afrocentrism is an academic theory and cultural and political movement that, led by people of African descent, promotes the contributions of black people to Western civilizations according to Encyclopedia Britannica. As you can see, it's not just Jada and her writers trying to appropriate and erase long-standing traditions. But even people like Kevin Hart are pushing this narrative. All it takes is a few minutes of misinterpreted information to spread in order for it to become a cultural wildfire. The revisionist historical erasure can and will systematically rewrite the core foundations of Egyptian history if left unchecked. Why else would Netflix add Cleopatra to a series dubbed African Queens? I can only imagine what's the next historical figure that they'll appropriate. But as many have pointed out, this sort of cultural appropriation only seems to be done in one direction these days. Because imagine if Netflix had a White Queen series and made Rosa Parks the focus of one of their documentaries. Yeah, not a good look, but that's where we're at right now with this. Anyway.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, "Don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black."
Recently, Bounding Into Comics also reported on how around 60% of Netflix's entire catalog features women in leading roles. This push was created by Netflix when they partnered with the USC Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism, where they release yearly reports detailing how Netflix is approaching their diversity and inclusion efforts. With 64.6% of their movies and 56.6% of their shows featuring women in a leading or co-leading role. With 26.9% of directors making films for Netflix being women and 38% of show creators also being women. And roughly 1/3 of Netflix's series are being led by women of color and 35% of their programs feature LGBT actors in leading roles. Ultimately, as said by Dr. Stacy Smith, who's the founder of the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, Netflix, as of right now, is a female-driven company. Essentially, this explosion of female-led diversity-driven content has led to loads of representation, but it's also lowered the bar of quality considerably. And that's not because women are making things, I should say, but because Hollywood and places like Netflix care far more about diversity than the quality of their products. Progressive ideologies can only take you so far, as no matter how diverse your cast may seem, it's the story and the quality of the product that matters in the end. I don't care what the people on screen have between their legs. I just care that I'm watching something that's not wasting my time when I could be doing something else. Netflix doesn't have a diversity or inclusion problem per se, but they definitely have a quality control problem. Netflix's Cleopatra proves that when you value ideology over quality, you end up with something that speaks to no one and just wastes the time of those who spend time watching it in the first place. Dear Netflix, if anybody who works there is watching this, I implore you to at least listen to this. You can keep having diversity in your programs, but for the love of God, just give us good products. Even places like Disney Plus have lost 4 million subscribers over the last quarter, and all of this damage could be easily fixed if these companies stopped valuing ideology over the quality of their shows. But in the end, it's nice to know that Netflix's Cleopatra won't be nominated for any Emmys or anything else anytime soon. Well, maybe some Razzies, we'll see. But when you value ideology over art, you reap what you sow. And in Netflix's case, it seems all of this bending over backwards to appease woke activists will lead to nothing but another disaster that'll just be the next nail in the streaming service's coffin. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more content like this, share the video, and I'll see you in the next one.